Tony Bellew knocks out David Haye in the 11th round. Now, let me just say right off the bat, I, like most people, picked David Haye to win this fight. In my personal perspective, I picked David Haye because he is the more talented fighter and just a much better fighter all round. But in all my pre-fight videos in the lead up to this fight, I kept saying, including in my final thoughts video, I kept saying that an upset would not shock me because David Haye has been out the ring for so long. He's had injuries. He hasn't had a real fight in 5 years at 36 years old. Whereas Tony Bellew has been fighting quality opposition. So that's why an upset to me wasn't off the cards. And I'm not shocked by what happened at all. I mentioned in the David Haye Mark Demori fight and in the Jurjai fight that to me, his stance looked off. He was throwing punches in an awkward fashion in the Demori fight and in the Jurjai fight. And a lot of people left comments in the comment section saying, Hatman, you don't know what you're talking about. He looked the same. He looked like the normal David Haye in those two fights. What are you talking about? There's no difference in his stance. There's no difference in the way he's throwing punches. Yes, there was. Again, I'm not making it up. In those two videos, they're still up on my channel. I was saying his stance don't look right. He looks, weird the way he's throwing his shots. And you saw that here in the first round against Tony Bellew. He was very slow on his feet. His foot speed is totally gone. That old David Haye foot speed is a thing of the past. That was evident very early. And he looked very wild. The punches were not crisp and snappy and well delivered. They were sloppy and wild. And as the fight progressed, you could see the anxiety setting in with David Haye because things were just not going according to plan. He really thought he was just going to go in there, hit Tony Bellew on the chin, and that would be it. But perhaps David Haye underestimated how much ring rust he would have going into this fight and how much age would play a factor and his injuries, because we have to talk about his injuries. We know we don't like excuses and so on and so forth, but it was very clear in this fight that David Haye was injured. He seemed to throw out his right shoulder at one point. He went for a huge right hand, missed it, and seemed to throw out his right shoulder. So that old shoulder injury perhaps reoccurred. He wasn't throwing much right hands after that. And also he seemed to injure his ankle. So he was a guy with almost one arm, or at least a badly compromised right arm, and an injured ankle, which could have been that Achilles that he apparently went to a specialist to check out in the week of the fight. It could be those two injuries that actually reoccurred during the fight. But to David Haye's credit, the fight wasn't fought at a murderous pace at all. Tony Bellew was very cautious. And this is another thing I mentioned in my final thoughts video. I said, if Tony Bellew sets his mind on surviving the first few rounds, don't be surprised if he actually can do it. Because he's a veteran at this stage, Tony Bellew. If he wants to be able to survive, don't be surprised if he can do it. David Haye's never been an offensive juggernaut. David Haye is a guy who is primarily a counterpuncher, a guy who likes you to come at him and then he'll either pot shot you or hit you with counters. When he's forced to come forward, David Haye, he's not that effective. He's not a guy that's going to swarm all over you and hit you with all kind of punches. He's never been that kind of guy, which is why I felt like if Bellew was defensive, very defensive, as he was, he's got a good chance of surviving the early going. And I felt that even against the prime David Haye, he'd have a good chance of surviving the early going if he's ultra defensive. But here, this was certainly not a prime David Haye. David Haye, let's be real, looked like a shot fighter in there. Timing totally off. And that's one of the first things that you notice when a fighter is shot, is their timing is just totally off. And Haye's timing, for all to see, was terrible in there. Missing wildly from the very opening bell. Awkward stance, slow feet. He just looked horrible. And he needs to thank his lucky stars that he didn't actually get that Anthony Joshua fight, because this fight ended badly for Haye. The Joshua fight would have ended a lot worse for him. You can't jump back into the ring with an Anthony Joshua after 5 years out with all those injuries and it end well for you. So, we found out, again, just to reiterate, I picked David Haye in the fight. Okay, but I wasn't as adamant as other people that there's no way an upset can happen. No, I always felt an upset could happen, because why are we taking it on blind faith that Haye's going to be the same as he was when he fought Chisora in terms of ability and what have you. Why were we taking it on blind faith? You know, that's the thing. And this is what can happen when you've been out the ring for so long at that age. The fight was an enthralling fight. It was an intriguing fight. There wasn't that much action, particularly not from Bellew's side, until Hay threw out his right shoulder. Then Bellew started pressing a little bit more, but he was still very careful about the way he was pressing. And it looked as though it might even go the distance. Hay was taking Bellew's shots very well. You know, credit to Hay. He's showed a lot of heart hanging in there with the injuries, so on and so forth. Showed a lot of toughness and showed a decent amount of stamina in there. You know, it's something I've criticized Hay for in the past, but he showed decent stamina in there, to be particularly under the circumstances. But in the 11th round, he finally got caught by Bellew with more shots and he was knocked out of the ring. I don't think Hay was particularly hurt in terms of concussed, but because his body was so mashed up by that point, his ankle and everything, and his balance was all off, that he just got knocked out of the ring. And when he got back in the ring, his trainer, Shane McGuigan, threw in the towel. And I think that was the right thing to do, because, you know, it took him an age to get back in the ring. And the trainer is there to protect the fighter at the end of the day. Hay had no chance of winning. He couldn't get any real power in his own shots because his ankle just wasn't there to be able to generate the power, or his right shoulder. So it was what it was. Hay's career appears to be finished. He took this fight believing it would be an easy walkover job, easy money, and it backfired in spectacular fashion. This is what happens. And for those boxing fans who are older, like myself, many of you won't be shocked by this, particularly if you are a really hardcore boxing fan, because you would have seen countless upsets over the years. And this upset right here does not rank, in my personal view, particularly highly. You know, I think Lennox Lewis versus Oliver McCall, much bigger upset. Lewis versus Rackman, much bigger upset. Obviously, Douglas Tyson, way bigger upset. You know, and there's many, many others on down the line. Even Tommy Morrison against Michael Bent was a bigger upset than this. This is not a particularly massive. I know that they're going to hype it and all this kind of stuff because of the perception people had of David Hay. But again, just to close out the video, he ain't had a real fight in 5 years. And Bellew's been fighting quality opposition. So you shouldn't be shocked. Yeah, even if you, like me, picked Hay, you shouldn't be shocked by the result of this fight, to be honest with you, given the circumstances. So it was what it was. I mean, just the fact that Bellew took so long to get rid of Hay when Hay was clearly injured shows that, you know, let's be fair, David Hay is the better fighter. If that was the David Hay who fought Derek Chisora, I've got no doubt that David Hay would have won the fight against Tony Bellew. It might not have been particularly easy, but I've got no doubt the Hay who fought Chisora would have beat Bellew on that evidence, based on what I saw Bellew do in the ring tonight. But we don't have that Hay no more. We've clearly got a shot fighter. So where from here for David Hay? We'll see. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. It's happening. I'm out.